This story takes place during my senior year of high school. Back then, I was a typical rebellious teenager, not a bad kid, just a bit of a punk when it came to my family. I had a loving family, but I was that older brother who felt way too cool to spend time with them. They always expected me to look after my little brother, Jake, who was only 10 at the time. With an 8-year age gap, we might as well have been from different planets. Whenever we took trips, we usually stayed near the ocean. We lived about 5 hours from the coast, so it was an easy drive. This specific year, my parents decided on a trip to Maine. Looking back as an adult, I'd love to go back there, but as an 18-year-old, I thought it was the most boring destination on Earth. Before I go further, I have to admit, I was a total jerk back then. Even as I narrate this, I can't believe how difficult I was being. We arrived at the rental house, and honestly, it was incredible. It looked like something straight out of a horror novel. It was a massive white house with green shutters, tucked deep within a thick grove of trees. My dad even joked, "This is how most horror movies start, isn't it?" Not the best thing to say to a 10-year-old, but Jake was just as mesmerized by the place as I was. Inside, the layout was like a maze. The center of the house was a huge living room with a massive view of the woods. The rest of the place was a series of intersecting hallways that didn't seem to make any sense, like a house you'd build in a video game rather than a real architectural plan. But the weirdest part wasn't the hallways. It was that the house was connected to a small adjoining unit where the owner lived. His name was Hugh. He was strange. He was tall, wore a sweat-stained bucket hat, and had noticeably yellow teeth. But it was his personality that stood out. He was loud, goofy, and eccentric. He kept talking about how kind people are in Maine while my family just nodded politely. He told us he was right next door if we needed anything, and otherwise, we wouldn't see him all week. We weren't thrilled about sharing a wall with a stranger, but we tried to make the best of it. Well, my family did. I was busy complaining and looking for any reason to go home. The first morning, my parents announced we were going on a long hike. I refused to go. After some arguing, they let me stay behind while the three of them left. The real reason I stayed was that I just started dating a girl named Danny and wanted to talk to her. I knew I wouldn't have service on the trails. I spent the morning texting her and sending pictures of the weird house layout. When I told her about the adjoining house, she didn't believe me. I told her I'd send a video to prove it. At the end of one of the halls, there was a door. I filmed it, telling her that Hugh lived right behind it. To my surprise, when I turned the handle, it wasn't even locked. The worst part, that door was right next to my bedroom. I was sleeping inches away from an unlocked entrance to a stranger's home. I ended up walking inside while on FaceTime with Danny. It was a normal house inside, just a TV and a couch. Suddenly, I heard a door shut deep inside the unit. I panicked and ran back to our side. Minutes later, Hugh was knocking at our front door. He was still smiling but asked why I was filming his house. I tried to lie and say I was lost, but he didn't buy it. He told me he had cameras and got an alert when the door opened. He'd seen me on video flashing my phone everywhere. I finally told the truth, and he just laughed it off, saying, "Nobody in Maine locks their doors." After he left, you better believe I locked that door. Danny told me she didn't trust him and that I needed to protect myself. I ended up grabbing a heavy wooden chair and propping it against the door as a makeshift barricade. When my family got back, they were more angry at me for trespassing than worried about Hugh. They were right, but I still snapped at them. 30 minutes later, they wanted to head out for dinner. Again, I refused to go. They were tired of fighting with me, so they left to grab food, leaving me alone as the sun went down. Outside, it became pitch black, not a single light for miles. A few hours later, I was on the couch when I heard a massive crash. I jumped up immediately. It came from the hallway near Hugh's door. My heart sank. I realized that sound was likely the heavy wooden chair being knocked over. Someone was coming in. I snuck toward the hallway, hopping to catch him. It was too dark to see, so I flipped the light switch. The chair was on the floor, knocked flat, and right next to it was a backpack that didn't belong to me. I didn't wait. I ran to the screened-in porch, locked the inner door, and crouched under a patio table in the fetal position. I'd forgotten my phone in the living room. I heard footsteps inside, just normal, steady walking. It felt like hours, but eventually I saw my dad's headlights pulling in. I ran out to the van, shouting for them to stay inside. I was hysterical. That's when Hugh walked over. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. He wasn't goofy anymore. He told my dad they needed to talk privately. My dad's face went pale. He told us all to get in the van and drove us to a grocery store parking lot a mile away. Minutes later, police cars went screaming past us toward the house. My dad finally told us what Hugh had seen. Hugh had gotten an alert when the chair was knocked over. He thought I was playing a prank again, but he had a gut feeling something was wrong. He checked a camera he had hidden in the hallway of our rental. When I turned the hall light on, he watched the footage. He saw the knocked-over chair, but then he saw something else. A tall, bald man stepped out of my bedroom. A man who wasn't my father and definitely wasn't me. The stranger grabbed the backpack and retreated back into the room. Hugh had seen me hide on the porch and stayed in the bushes nearby with a clear view of the house to make sure the intruder didn't come after me, while he called the police and waited for my parents. We stayed in a hotel that night and drove home the next morning. They never caught the guy. Even with the cameras, they didn't know how he got in or how long he'd been hiding in my room while I was texting on the couch. Sometimes the scariest things aren't the people you meet face to face, but the ones hiding in plain sight, just waiting for the lights to go out. Every year, my family goes on this massive vacation together. We stay at my aunt and uncle's place right on the ocean in West Palm Beach. Their son, Will, is the same age as me, and we've always been close. It's a huge family affair. My other aunt and uncle come too, bringing their daughter, Teresa. Teresa is my best friend. We grew up together, and because we're the same age and look alike, people always assume we're twins. We used to lean into it as a joke when we were younger. As we got older, the three of us, Teresa, Will, and I, started treating these vacations like a week-long party. We'd spend the day with the family on the beach, but at night, Will would take us to all the local bars and clubs since he knew the area. On one specific trip a few years ago, the three of us witnessed something that still keeps me up at night. Teresa and Will aren't as bothered by it. They think it was just a prank or a weird coincidence, but I'm not so sure. Will has a habit of having one too many drinks. Because of this, Teresa and I usually know exactly when he's hit his limit. That's our cue to find a ride home. I was always the responsible one, making sure nobody ended up in a ditch. On this particular night, Will started getting rowdy at a bar. He was acting like he owned the place because he was a local, and he ended up annoying the wrong people. He actually got physically thrown out by the bouncer. He was fine, mostly just his ego was bruised, but I knew it was time to go. I told Teresa to keep an eye on him while I tried to call an Uber. While I was on the phone with my boyfriend, Teresa ran over to me, completely panicked. She looked away for 1 second and Will had wandered off. We started running through the streets, yelling his name. Finally, Teresa spotted him. He was walking in a crooked line, heading straight toward a heavily wooded area, basically a swamp. In Florida, I don't know the difference between a forest and a swamp, but this place was thick with brush and mud. Teresa managed to grab him just before he entered the trees and started laying into him. But as soon as she let go, Will, fueled by some weird drunken adrenaline, sprinted deep into the swamp. We didn't even think. We just chased after him. We caught up to him eventually because he was too stumbling to move fast. Our feet were covered in gross mud. Just as we started to lead him out, Will suddenly told us to shush. He looked genuinely terrified, which was a complete 180 from his behavior 10 seconds prior. Then we heard it. Shouting and screaming coming from somewhere deep in the brush. It wasn't a normal scream. It was a sound I'd never heard before and hoped to never hear again. It sounded like someone was in serious trouble. We froze, staying absolutely silent while those screams echoed all around us in the dark. Then, as abruptly as it started, it stopped. We stayed huddled in that mud for 15 minutes, paralyzed, before we finally sprinted back to the street and got a ride home. We sobered up instantly. The next morning, Teresa, who is a big hiker, convinced us to go back and find the spot. She actually managed to lead us right back to the muddy indents where we had been crouching the night before. We pointed in the direction we thought the screams came from and started pushing through the thick bushes. A few minutes in, Teresa gasped. Hanging from a tree branch was a single sleeve of a denim jacket, just the sleeve. On the ground below it, the mud was churned up with footprints, like a violent struggle had happened right there. I wanted to leave, but Teresa pushed further. A few yards away, we found the rest of the denim jacket in a small clearing. More bunched-up footprints were everywhere. Leading away from the jacket was a single set of tracks that disappeared into the thickest part of the swamp. I was done. I told them I didn't feel safe and we needed to go. Back at the house, I wanted to call the police, but Will and Teresa talked me out of it. They argued that it could have been a joke, or that we'd just be linking ourselves to a crime we didn't commit. They worried the cops wouldn't believe 3 kids who wandered into a swamp in the middle of the night. I regret listening to them. It's been years, and I still hear that scream in my head. I've always wondered if I truly witnessed a crime that night. Sharing this has been therapeutic, but I hope none of you ever have to hear a sound like that. You never truly forget it. This story happened to my girlfriend and me last summer. It was our first real trip together as a couple, so it felt like a major milestone. The trip ended up being memorable, but for all the wrong reasons. For privacy's sake, I'll call my girlfriend Vanessa. Now, one thing you should know is that Vanessa always tells me I'm way too nice. She says there's a difference between being polite and my version of nice, which is treating every stranger like they're my long-lost best friend. I've always seen it as a strength, but as this story proves, it can be a dangerous weakness. It started on our way down to Ocean City, Maryland. We were about 20 minutes away from our condo when I pulled over at a gas station. While I was inside, a guy, who later introduced himself as Henry, bumped into me. He started apologizing profusely, and being me, I put my hands up and told him it was totally fine. Henry was a good-looking guy, maybe in his late 20s, wearing a pink and black button-up. He had kind eyes and made great eye contact. We ended up chatting in line, and I mentioned we were heading to Ocean City. He lit up, saying he and his girl were going there too. I even told him the name of our condo building. He smiled and said he thought they were staying right near us. One of my flaws is not seeing the red flags in people. I exchanged numbers with him right there, thinking we could grab dinner or hit the beach together. When I got back to the car, Vanessa saw my face and just rolled her eyes. The next morning we went down to the beach early. Around 10:00 a.m. I heard someone shout my name. I turned around and there was Henry waving at me. Following him was a woman he introduced as Sarah. She was the polar opposite of Henry. While he was high energy, she looked miserable. She was pale, wearing huge sunglasses, a giant sun hat, and long sleeves. She carried a large, empty-looking tote bag and didn't seem to want to be there at all. Henry asked if they could join us. Against Vanessa's silent protests, I said yes. They didn't have any beach gear, no chairs, no towels. I ended up giving Sarah my chair. Henry mentioned they were staying in the building directly next to ours. To me, it was a crazy coincidence. To Vanessa, it was a major red flag. When we eventually went back to the room, Vanessa let me have it. She said Henry felt fake, and Sarah was incredibly rude. She pointed out how weird it was for someone to visit a beach town if they hated the sun so much they didn't even bring a towel. I promised her I wouldn't call him again. That night I was out on our fifth-floor balcony. It was late, and looking down at the beach, I saw a figure walking alone. It looked exactly like Sarah, same hat, same tote bag. I didn't think much of it until I went inside to lock the front door. I heard muffled talking right outside our condo. Before I could touch the knob, the handle shook violently, as if someone was trying to force their way in. I shouted, "Wrong room," and heard the sound of someone sprinting down the hallway. I assumed it was just a drunk tourist and went to bed. The next day it happened again. Henry and Sarah ran into us on the beach, wearing the exact same clothes as the day before. This time, I could tell Vanessa was done. I politely told Henry we were heading back for a romantic dinner and would text him later. As we were getting ready to head out, I looked off the balcony. I saw Sarah standing on the sand, staring at our building. Not the ocean, our building. A moment later, Henry emerged from the ground floor of our building and met her. They had a brief, heated exchange and walked away. While we were at dinner, Henry called my phone repeatedly. I didn't answer. Vanessa told me to just text him that we were going to bed so he'd stop. I sent the text. "We're walking back now, but heading straight to bed. Talk later." Immediately, my phone rang. Then I got a text that chilled me to the bone. It just said, "Don't go to your room yet." We stopped dead in the parking lot. Was he being weird, or was this a threat? When we finally reached our floor, we saw our door was cracked open. Vanessa waited in the hall while I stepped inside. The place had been tossed. Our suitcases were ransacked. The only things missing: a pair of my Jordans, Vanessa's bathing suit, and a printed photo of us that had been sitting on the dresser. We called the police, but Henry and Sarah were ghosts. The building next door had no record of them. The phone number went out of service an hour later. The police told us that sometimes people target tourists by being overly friendly to gain their trust and info. I learned a hard lesson that week. I still try to be a nice guy, but I'm a lot more careful about who I let into my circle. If you're ever in Ocean City, just keep your eyes open. Henry and Sarah might still be out there looking for their next best friend. That concludes tonight's journey into the dark. If these stories chilled you, make sure to like and subscribe to Whispered Night Stories. Sleep tight, and always double-check the locks on your doors.